Hi guys, welcome back to Babywearing and Breastfeeding, Nurturing Miracles, the podcast where we do a deep dive into everything baby wearing and breastfeeding, specifically tailored to our medically complex kids. I'm your host, Megan Pa, and today I'm super excited because I'm not just here interviewing a guest, but I'm hanging out with a friend. So today we have Tatiana Burgum. She is a wife, a mom of two. She is also a podcast host of Prophetic Justice. And that is a great podcast about the anti-trafficking movement. You guys definitely need to catch that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Apple Tunes. What is it, Tatiana? Help me out. Oh, she's fixing her mic. Anyways, let me tell you that we have been friends for, I guess, going on 10 years because Simone's on this planet, right? And Eloise is just a little bit younger than her. So going on 10 years. So we're friends. Our daughters are really good friends. Tatiana moved away from me 5 years ago. So super sad. I know we've only seen each other in person like once in 5 years.
Yeah, it's been difficult.
Soon.
Yeah.
But so today, Tatiana and I actually share like a unique connection. And that is we are both mothers of medically complex kids. So you guys know Tyson's story. Tatiana's story is that when she was pregnant with her baby, she found out that her baby had a arachnid, and help me if I'm messing this up, but
no, that's right.
An arachnid cyst on her brain. And so before she was a year, she had already had 2 brain surgeries. So really stressful, really big, really heavy stuff. So Tatiana, can you just share a little bit about the moment of diagnosis and then kind of from there, the journey that led to her first surgery?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's still like, as you know, too, like looking back on these things is so weird because it's just as like when you're in these phases of like trying to figure out what's going on with yourself or your kids, any health issue that you can't find answers to right away, your world completely comes to a halt. Like it just is like you look back and you're just like, I don't know how I made it through that. But yeah, and it's interesting too. So we had Eloise and she's now 9, just turned. And then we also, I don't know, like just to even back up before that, like we weren't really do I really want to say it? But it's true. We weren't really like on the bandwagon of having kids. Like that was just not my husband and my, that was not what we saw in the future. Eloise was like an unplanned pregnancy, and it took a while to kind of come around to like the fact that this was going to happen and like it was going to be a good thing. And so then I ended up loving motherhood, and I was like, you know what, I think I can do this again. And so we had met because you did the parenting classes when I was pregnant with Eloise, and we actually weren't like, we were friends, but it was more like acquaintances.
Yeah, acquaintance friends. Yeah.
And at that time, I think you had 2 of the kiddos, or was it?
I had Lincoln and Simone because Simone's the same age as Eloise is, and then Rowan is the same age as Esther.
Yep. So we weren't like super close at this point, but you were like the most amazing doula. You were so awesome, and I was so like thankful to have you. You were at that time like just our Bradley birthing coach, and so we go on, we're a few years into parenting, and I'm like, I think I want another kid. Like I'm praying for another kid. It was like literally like just when we got pregnant with her, it was like an answer to prayer. And I was like, this is so awesome. Like God is answering my prayers. You know, we were like, I was excited. Jake was coming around to it. He probably has his own story that evolves around this. Maybe there should be like a husband version of this podcast. But we get to like our 20-week appointment, and I will never forget, like when you talk about a moment that just stops you, like time slows down, like you just will remember it forever. I'm sitting there, they're like super excited, right? Like, cause they're, it's our ultrasound. And then I just remember the nurse like went completely silent and like just really long time. And I was like, what's going on? And without like her bedside manner was like not great. She was like, I think I just need to get a doctor in here. And I'm like, what? And she's like, no, like the baby's there, baby's fine, like moving, but there's something on her brain or something in her head. And I was like, well, you can't just tell me that. And like, what do you, now we wait for who
Right.
are we waiting for? And so it took like 20 or so minutes for the doctor to come in, for the doctor to look at the scans. And she comes in and she's like, listen, there's something on the brain. We don't know what it is. I don't have answers for you. And then she said too, she was like, if you want to get an abortion, like you can, because we don't know how this is going to go. And I personally am pro-life. So that was just not like, that was not an option. But I always think back to that because I'm like, if like, to each their own belief on it. But if I hadn't been as strong as I was on my stance on life, it would have been I would have been easily swayed. Like, okay, I guess this is like probably the end. Like maybe I should just like do it because it's gonna be like easier. And so anyways, that was another weird thing that came out of that, was like man, like how many women like based on fear and just like the unknown, like decide to go down that road. And so yeah, she's like, it literally became a moment of like, you have to come in weekly. Like this looks like a really big thing in the brain from what we know about this. Cause at the time there was like not any research really about this. Like essentially it could grow to be her brain. Like the cyst would be the brain in place of a brain. And they're like, so she could literally just possibly die like at any point.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding? Yeah, come on, you
so
guys.
You didn't even know if you were gonna make it all the way to the end of your pregnancy, and then if you did, you didn't know she was gonna live or how long.
Yes. And that
and you
was
still decided to continue the pregnancy.
Yeah.
That's interesting because as long as we've been friends, we've talked about it, but I don't know that I never knew that story. That's a lot of strength, girl. That's a lot of strength.
It is. I mean, also too, like, I really never want to like come in judgment around the issue of being pro-life or pro-abortion. So I never, but we're taught, because that was just a moment where I was like, if I was not as pro-life as I am, I would have probably done it, because I just would have thought like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like this sounds like this is the end for the baby. But I just had this feeling like no one knows how a child's life will go. You can never determine. Like you have no, I mean, yes, there's like, you can look at past history of how the diagnosis has come out for other people, but it is not ever the same for every person. So you can't determine a life based on how you think it's going to go. So that was like just pretty, that was just a solid thing in my head that like, no matter what, I was going to go through to the end, whatever that looked like, to possibly the point of natural death, I guess you could say. Yeah. So from there, it was like weekly appointments. It was just like tracking this thing. There was talk of like possibly going in while I was pregnant and doing surgery on her head. But then it was like, literally, it was like they would go in with like a needle, essentially, like through everything. It's so gross to think about. And they're like, this could work. It could help alleviate some things. And I just was like, that doesn't feel it. I just want this. I want her to be out so that we can evaluate what's happening. Like,
yeah, you had a real God. I didn't. So not only did you have the really big decision of, do you terminate the pregnancy or do you keep going? Because they're telling you, whatever, there's a percentage that this baby's not going to make it. This baby's going to have a cyst for a brain. Yep. And then you had the decision of later on, do we do surgery in utero? Do we wait until she comes out? Let me ask you, do you feel like because you're having to navigate all of this that it made it more challenging to bond with her while you were pregnant?
I don't think, for me, it did not. Now, Jake, I think, has a different viewpoint, and I probably should have had him on as we're talking about this and I'm thinking about it. But I think it was like, I kind of was like, I'm going to soak up every moment of this pregnancy because I don't know what the next day holds. So this was the baby I prayed for. Like, I'm going to embrace it. But for Jake, it was like, I think that I need to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So he emotionally definitely was like shut down.
Detaching. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. What about for you? Because I know, like, I mean, yeah. How was it for you? For you guys.
So we had with Tyson. So Tyson, his initial diagnosis was just that he had hydronephrosis, and that's very common. But every time I went back in, his kidneys were more and more swollen. And by like, I don't know, 32, 34 weeks, that was the only time where I was like, I didn't know he was going to make it, because the perinatologist in my appointment let it slip that she had never seen kidneys as swollen as his. And the one other time that she had, that baby's kidneys had burst in utero and died. And so naturally, I spent a week freaking the heck out, thinking that he was going to die and, he wasn't going to make it to term. And then I was smart enough to pick myself up and get a second opinion. And they were like, no, like that's the likelihood of that is super low.
Yeah.
And then he was born, and we went through it all over again, because then when he came out, as you know, and I'm like, you hit on something that, you're so strong that you did this, but I think that it's important because we have to say they can't see everything. Like,
right.
They are looking through you. And so when Tyson was born, when it was actually more optimistic when I was pregnant, they thought he had 2 kidneys. And then when he was born, they found out he only had 1. And so then the diagnosis was more serious.
Yeah.
And then we spent that week in the NICU where they thought he was going to need an immediate kidney transplant. And then the whole story was that with kidney transplants, you have to be 22 pounds, and he was 8 pounds. And they didn't think he was going to make it. And so then I'm thinking he's going to die again. Yeah. And so there is a really weird thing that happens in your brain where you're doing such a vast spectrum of emotions where you go from like all the love in the world you could possibly feel for anything, anytime, anywhere, into this little baby to I'm also mentally planning this child's funeral over and over again in my head on repeat.
Yep.
And also hoping that's not the case and thinking, am I being dramatic? Am I missing something? And, like,
and then on top of that, like,
together.
We had other kids to take care of. Like, on top of that, you're also trying to give attention to the children that you already have who did not ask for any of this to happen, like, and need a parent who is present. And like, I think that could be a whole different podcast conversation, is like parenting.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've already decided that we need to have like a whole other podcast on like the husband, like the partners, I mean, and like the siblings, because they're absolutely processing it as well. So fast forward, right? So when Esther was born, walk me through, like, I know the birth process, but walk me through when she's been born. Did you already have her? I mean, I'm assuming you already had her medical team set up. I'm assuming that you already had an idea in place of what the next steps were. Can you walk me through?
We had like an amazing, like, when I look back, I'm like, it was only God. Like, so during pregnancy, I'm going every week. Like, still, there's not any answers. I went down the Google rabbit hole, which was so dumb, and they told me not to. But, and then I had you as my doula. You were my doula for this one. The prior pregnancy, you had just been like my
child birth instructor, I think. And I be super crunchy here. I think I encapsulated her placenta too, right?
Oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah. Yes. That was awesome. What really saved me, I truly think, both times that like was awesome. But yeah, and I mean, there, as you know, how any parent listening who's gone through anything like this knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say this, but I would literally climb in the crib that we would put together. Like, some nights as a pregnant woman, I had like lost a ton of weight, so I wasn't, eating well, but I was like trying to like, because you get depressed, you're pregnant, you're trying to like be healthy for your child, but like you're just losing it. And so anyways, I like looked better. Like if you had looked at me from the back, I never looked pregnant. It was awesome. And so anyways, so I'm like praying every night, and I would like get in her crib and like literally pray in the crib. Like I would just like pray and cry in this crib, empty crib. And I will never forget, we were going through names. I had a name picked out. I don't even remember what it was, but it like God was like, name her Esther. And I was like, I don't like that name. Like, that's not the name I picked.
What? Another story you've never told me.
Yes. I don't think we have gone down this road. Yeah. So I'm praying, and he goes, name her Esther and I'll heal her. And it was like as clear as day. And I was like, okay, awesome. So like I was like, okay, God, like I'll name her Esther. And then I would like go back and forth because I like didn't love the name Esther. But then finally God won, and he was like, he would tell me every time I would pray, name her Esther and I'll heal her, name her Esther and I'll heal her. And I would get even angry because nothing was changing in the pregnancy piece of it. Like, so I'm like, whatever, I'll name her Esther, fine. And so that is her name. Her name is Esther. And so they had like a team that like while I was pregnant, and then a team set up for after I was pregnant, which I don't know what that would be. Like
different doctors, anyway. Like different types of that. Like, obviously when you're pregnant, you have a perinatologist, the high risk. But then interesting. So okay.
It wasn't like all pediatrician specific. It was like while I was pregnant, it was like people who like specialized in like essentially like babies who were like had extreme health issues in the womb, and then like specifically like brain. This was like neurological. It was so, I mean, but DC too has so many specific types of doctors.
You got that. I mean, that is the one nice thing about the Northern Virginia DC area.
Such a blessing to be there. Yeah. And so, you were my doula when she was born, but we had a NICU team because they're like, you might give birth.
Where did you go? I didn't ask you this. Did you go to Fairfax or DC Children's?
No. So they wanted me to give birth in Children's, but I was like, no, I want to give birth in like, because at first I really wanted to do like a home birth. That was like my diehard, like what I wanted to do. Finally, the doulas at the birth center in Alexandria like persuaded me. They're like, really, like, we would never say this like if we didn't feel it, but we think you need to go to a hospital. Like, we're not gonna give you services. It's like, really, come on. And so then I transferred over, but I did it at Fairfax, and they wanted me to go to Children's, and I was like, no, like, I'm just not doing that. I want to be in like a normal setting, not.
This is like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's like, this was a whole nother topic I thought of for an episode too, is that, and I don't know, obviously, because I am not like a medically complex, like doctor expert, especially with her specialty with neuro and brain, but did her condition affect her birth? Do you know what I mean? Like,
so no one knew what was going to happen. And that was why they wanted me to give birth in Children's, because they're like, she might have to stay here. Like, this might just be where she is. And I was like, nope, like, we'll transfer, but I'm not doing that. And so she was fine when she was born, but they had NICU, like, they had a NICU doctor, I think, actually during the delivery, like right during the delivery, because they thought that they were going to have to hand her over. What they thought was going to happen was that her brain was going to expand, essentially, like very quickly, because of how intensive labor is, and especially at the head, like it's all can be messed up, and the pressure and then the expansion of like going back to a normal size, they thought was just going to be like, we might need to just rush her. And so but she was fine when she was born. She was totally like, nothing happened. They monitored her, and they let her stay with me, which was like one of the hardest things, because they were like, we don't know, like, based on what we feel could happen, like, if you'll see her. Like, it was that, like, if her head expands, and I'm like, the head,
take her right away. Yes.
And so they're just like, if we see that something's happening, we're going to have to just like cut the cord and rush her in. Like that's just how it's going to be. And so thankfully, I think like you helped me be calm, but I don't think you knew the level of it at the time.
No, I really didn't. Like, it's interesting because, you know, and do you know that I have gone back like in the years that we were together when you were still here and thought about it a lot, in the sense that like, I don't know that because when we talked about it, I don't know that we really went in depth too much. I don't think I had a great understanding. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I had a great understanding of what was going on. And when you're on the outside, you're afraid to ask too many questions, which is a weird thing, because I think maybe now that like you went through your thing with Esther first, and then because Tyson is younger, but now when I went through it, I realized I wish I would have asked more, because you're afraid to, as a friend, because you don't want to make the mom feel bad or hurt the mom's feelings.
Oh my gosh.
But as now being on the other side as the parent, it's almost like, I don't know if this is the right word, but like cathartic to have somebody help you talk it out. Know, even if it's just answering basic questions. And so I was like, man, going back, I was like, I wish I would have asked more, because I was confused. I didn't know, but I didn't want to ask.
Yeah. Well, and I think a piece of it too is I didn't fully grasp, like looking back, I'm like, you understand more as time goes on, the gravity of it all.
Situation.
And in my head, I think I made light of it. I think I just was like not wanting to talk about it. Like, so it was probably also me just not making it a heavy thing, because I was already like, I had so much anxiety. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she was born, she was fine. And then they transferred us to the Children's Hospital in DC. And like, seriously, going back to like, it was only God. We got this neurosurgeon, John Miseros is his name. He was just like this like New Yorker who just like completely just like gives it to you straight, like, but has such a heart for children. Like, he's like, I just see every kid like they're my kid. I don't know how else to do this, you know. But he would just be like, this is the reality of it. Like, this is, because I would ask, like, I don't want you to sugarcoat it, just tell me how it is. And he would totally do that, which I love.
I love that. I think that needs to be more, like, it actually makes me angry when doctors try to sugarcoat it. I'm like, stop it. Tell me tell me straight up.
Yeah.
Also, because when you're going through it, this is for me, I'm speaking for myself, but going through it, my brain is not functioning super well. I feel like I'm in like this haze. And so it's even more important for somebody to just lay it out. Yeah.
Yep. And he was awesome. And literally the best doctor. And so I just remember he's like, you're like, when we got to the point, like, her brain, she got hydrocephalus. That was kind of like so that's like liquid in the brain, around the brain. And it wasn't draining because she had the cyst in the back of her head. So like, it was like the cyst was causing just like a buildup of fluid essentially. And it was causing her brain to like, her head was huge and like her eyes were like popped out a little bit. But she was like not in pain, which as I look back, I'm like, seriously, like that had to be God too, because she was totally fine. At least as far as we could tell, like she was not crying. There was not like stuff happening. She was fine. But he was like, we got to fix this. And so he's like, we'll go in, do like a little incision, try to drain it, essentially drain the liquid and just hope that helps. And, you know, there was like a moment where we're like, oh, this is like brain surgery. Like, this is not just like, and at first I was like, oh yeah, they'll just drain it. Like, no big deal. And then it just was like, no, our daughter's having brain surgery. Like our newborn, she was 3 months old at the time. And I remember we were kind of like, do we do it? Oh, a shunt was the other like situation that we were like, maybe we'll put a shunt in. It was either like trying to drain it, put a shunt in, but he was like, if you put a shunt in, it's a medical device in the brain. Chances of it failing are like, she's going to have to get it replaced at some point. It causes damage. And so he's like, if you can go without having a medical device, like, let's try it. But if it doesn't work, she's going to have like more intensive surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Jake was like, let's do the draining, see how that goes. And I was like, nope, I want the medical device. Like, I don't want to even have to think about another surgery. So we like disagreed. And I remember finally we were back in his office and he's like, Tatiana, I need you to look at me. He's like, I have never done a brain surgery that has ever failed. He's like, I'm pretty damn good at what I do. And any other time, that would have been like the most annoying thing. But I can't even tell you just the peace that came over me. I was like, yep, this is the route we go. And so that's what we did. And there just is never a time like that is going to be, like, will forever be in my brain the moment that he took her back in her little like gown.
Yeah.
And they like made her feel like so special going down the hall, and like he's like making her laugh, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like our kid is going into brain surgery. Like, what is happening right now? And
God, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that must be universal. The moment that the doctor, for me, it was the anesthesiologist both times that took Tyson back. And I'm sure Esther's surgery was a lot longer, but like Tyson's first surgery was in there for 4.5 hours. And I remember how sweet, like that will live in my mind forever. The moment where they take your baby and walk to the operating room.
Yes.
Like, oof.
Yes.
Oof.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It was a slow motion moment. And we really like, I think I would like to say I was like a little bit like just that waiting time. It was like a 4-hour surgery. And no, okay, I take that back. It was like 2. Her next surgery was like a 4-hour surgery. So yeah, so we're waiting, and it just was that like the reality of like we could not see, like we don't know what is going to happen when he comes through.
You don't know what's going to happen in surgery.
Mm-hmm. Like, so he came back, and like first thing he says is like, she's totally fine. But like just that moment of watching him walk through those doors, and like I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, and so it did drain, it was good, but then it essentially like didn't work. She like built back up, the cyst was growing, and we had to go back in for like another surgery 3 months later. And that was also like, so she was in the hospital like I want to say a week for that first surgery.
Yeah.
Yep. And then and then we had to go back in, and both of these like landed, it was like October for the first surgery, and then like the next surgery was like Christmas. And so it's always like a bittersweet, like I'm sure you know what that's feeling of like, oh my gosh, this time, however many years ago, we were dealing with something completely different in our lives.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was interesting. And so I can't remember, so this is what I was going to say about the doctor. He was amazing. I never Googled him. He was always like, you can go get a second opinion, but he was so good at what he did and so confident that I never felt like I needed to, because he was just brutally honest. And so we're in one, I think it was the first surgery. I'm sitting in the hospital, children's hospital room with Esther in recovery, and a nurse comes in and she's like making small talk, and she's like, how did you get on Macero's caseload? And I was like, what do you mean? We just like, this was the doctor, like when I called to make an appointment, this was him. She's like, what? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, he's like the most sought after pediatric neurosurgeon in the country. And I was like, no, he's not. And she's like, yeah, he has like a waiting list of.
Girl, that's another God miracle right there.
It totally was. And I thought she was kidding, kind of, because I was like, no, like, I don't know, like, he's kind of a a-hole. Like, he was totally who you needed.
You know what? Who cares about bedside manner? If he is the best pediatric neurosurgeon, like, I don't care. You can say, hey, you to me. Like,
yes. And so she leaves, and I Google him, and as sure enough, his name is like linked to like the country's top pediatric neurosurgeon. And I was like, what? Like, how did we get on his team? Like, now I'm like, got questions, because we didn't do anything to get there. We just called, made the appointment. He was the one that we walked in. He was our, he was her neurosurgeon. And so, yeah, again, another God moment. And he never answered how, because I was like, hey, like, I heard this thing about you. That's kind of cool. I think he just, I don't know how it happened. I still don't know. It was God.
That was
And
good.
so, yeah, that was another thing that was like, man. And even to this day, sometimes I'm like, if I don't hear what I want to hear now, because we do have a team, she goes in every year to get checked up by neurology, like Children's Hospital here. But I'm like, if I don't like what they're gonna say, I'm gonna call her old doctor. He's gonna be honest with me. But yeah,
So it catches up, like, so she gets checked out every year. How is she doing?
So she had her second
Tell
surgery.
everybody how old she is too, because
she is currently 6 years old, and so she is amazing right now. She's seriously, like, that was another thing. Like, we had the 2 surgeries, and I was like, God, like, she's not healed, so like obviously I shouldn't have named her Esther. Like, that was I was gullible there, a moment of weakness. And yeah, so she had the second surgery. We moved back to Minnesota from the DMV area because we just needed to be closer to home. We weren't sure what the future held for her, like if she was going to keep needing surgeries. Mm-hmm. And we just couldn't be like away from family if that was the case. So we moved back, and she has been completely fine ever since. Like, it truly is like a miracle, truly. Like, she had that surgery. She still has the cyst, but I'm actually like truly believing that at some point it's gonna disappear. Like, I don't know, maybe it won't. But anyway, she's not been symptomatic. I do have like PTSD though. Like, I'm sure you know how that goes. Like, or even just like, because I remember like they were like, we're not like, be careful when you fly because like the change in pressure could like cause something. So we flew with her for the first time this past like a few months ago, and I was like super scared because I was like, what if we're in the air and she's like, something happens, like what are we gonna do? And Jake was like, you just need to chill, like we can't live in fear, like this is just not how we can continue doing this. So it's little things like that that'll happen that is kind of like, okay, we're good. Like, yes, something could happen, but like right now she's totally good. So yeah, it's amazing. It is a miracle story for us.
I love it. That's so beautiful. Can you tell me, looking back, was there a specific support resource or person or
yeah, oh man, there's so many people who were like, I couldn't have gone through this. I would say like truly when I look back at it, like having your family, like having Eloise and your daughter be the same age, like knowing that we could go hang out with friends and like she could connect
eat mac and cheese.
Yes, and like connect with other, like she could be like around kids her age and like have a friend, like a true friend in Simone versus like us dealing with all our stuff and then like also isolating Eloise. Like, how unfair is that? So I just think like find a family that like can align with your family, because that really was super helpful. Same like when you guys went through with Tyson, I remember I brought over like Doritos and like a massive bottle of Costco wine or something and lasagna, and I just put it in your fridge. And then before we moved, we went on a family vacation with you all. And and so I just I know, that was so crazy. It was so fun. And so we truly though, I think it is finding like a family that is kind of like yours, who at least has the same age children, and you can kind of just be with them, like let your kids like be kids away from the situation that we were experiencing was really crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you? Who do you feel was like, do you have any moments of like looking back who was really helpful?
I would say, and what's funny is that we were pretty much pointing out each other, because I found, and it doesn't mean that they're not like the bestest and closest friends, but like I have some people who, and I think I may have been guilty of it myself, you know, a little bit with like when I mentioned it with you, and when I should have asked or talked to you about it more when I didn't know. When I was going through, and when we were still going through it actually, obviously, but like in the beginning stages when I was going through things with Tyson, I had friends who would like clam up. I got the feeling that they needed me to move on as far as like, don't talk about this. We don't want to talk about it. We don't know how to respond to you. And that was difficult for me to navigate because I was like, am I talking about it too much? Did I mention it too many times to them? You know, am I like, I just felt guilty, but I think everybody deals with things differently. And it's really weird. Sometimes I needed to talk about it. I needed to process it. And I quickly learned that some people just aren't that person for you, but I could always talk to you about it. And and like, you were the one person, like you and like just my mom and like my siblings.
You had an amazing family.
You were like the only people that I could talk about it to. And I had this weird thing where I felt like I kept track, a mental record of who I had talked to the most about it, so then I could go to the next person.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I think I've talked to my sister too many times this week about it. Let me go to Tatiana. And then, oh, maybe I've texted her too much this week. Let me go to my brother. You know what I mean? Like, I rotated you guys. I do my rotation.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. For the people listening, it's like having somebody that you can talk to and that you don't have to check yourself with them. Is super important.
Yeah. And I think too, like, I mean, so I've told this story about Esther many times. And I think like where I listened to it too. And I'm like, I think I would turn off like myself if I was listening to someone because so often the story doesn't end like it did for us. And I would just be like, all right, and we're done because screw you. That's not how I went for me or not how it's going for me. Or whoever's listening, you know, and that's real. Those feelings of like, okay, great, that it ended well for you, but it hasn't ended well for me. And that's another like reality that I think we have the luxury of, quite frankly, is like, we're not living in it still. And so I'm super honest about that piece of it. But also like, and I would love to say I've gotten better at dealing with like traumatic situations, but when traumatic situations happen in my life, I just want to feel some type of normalcy. So like, I won't talk about it. I'll act like I'll go wherever I can just act like it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like a piece of my reaction was like, where can I go? Who can I talk to and be around that makes me feel like how I want to feel normal?
Yeah.
Yep. And so, but there's shame in that because there would be times where people would be like, Tatiana, like, don't you need to talk? And it's like, no, I really don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good. And so also normalizing that, like, find places where you can just go and feel like your old self. And that's okay. Like, to do that. Like, that's okay too.
Yeah. Somebody, my aunt actually, because she's a grief counselor, and she gave me this really great piece of advice, which is, and I'm going to say it again for people listening, which is when you're trying to figure out if you're the friend or the family member and you're trying to figure out how to respond, ask them how they're feeling. Just straight up be blunt and like, how are you feeling about this? Do you want to talk about it? Like, you don't have to project yourself or like even respond until you feel them out first. And I was like, man, that's really solid advice. You know, like that's a really solid advice, because when it comes down to it, like if you're sharing this with somebody, then, you know, they're a value in your life. You care for them and they care for you. So like you want to respond like, in a loving manner. And so the best way to do that is just to feel them out. So how has like Esther's resilience inspired you, and how has it changed your view? Like, do you show up differently as a parent? Do you show up differently in the world and your view of faith and miracles? Like, are you a totally different person after this?
Yeah, you are not the same when you go, and that can be for anything. Like, you know, so I had lost my mom at a young age, like when I was in high school. And I really thought that was like the worst possible pain in my life I could have
Yeah.
gone through, like
Losing your
grief,
mom. Yeah.
everything like that. And so like you kind of like try to, and this is just like how we normalize traumatic things. We try to like compare it to other things and like, well, I went through this, so nothing can be as bad as this or whatever. Then I experienced that stuff with Esther, and I truly was like, oh my gosh, like there's nothing more painful than dealing with something with your own child. Like that is like a different level of pain and grief. And so I think it gave me like almost like a release from this idea that like you have to compare trauma in your life, and that there is like no right way to deal with things.
That's really good insight.
Yeah, that was one thing.
You don't have to compare traumas.
Yeah, no. And there is like the idea that you have to like be sad about something, like just the emotions you're feeling, they may not be logical to anyone else. Like people do, they just can't judge a book by its cover, like, you know. The other piece, yeah, the spiritual piece, like now I mean I always say like we're House of Miracles because God did a miracle. Like, so there is nothing or anyone on this earth who could persuade me that miracles don't happen, because I have like watched it. And so not to get like super religious, but not even religious, but spiritual, like I do a prayer team at my church. And so I had heard a pastor talk about like when you overcome something, you have power to help another person in that area or heal someone in that area. And so God has like, God just sends me people whose kids are going like through sickness, and we pray over them and something happens, like whether it's for the parent, like peace, or something for the child. And we've had Esther pray over other kids. Like it just was like the coolest. Like I just don't think I would believe it if I didn't live it, you know? So that's been another cool thing that's happened. But yeah, the spirituality piece of just like God, it's only God. Like there's so many things that just you can't explain. That's been the other piece. Yeah.
I love that. I really do. I love that, like, Esther's part in it, that that Esther is involved. And you know, how does would you mind sharing how she processes it? Like, I mean, I don't know that she doesn't have memory of it. Like
she doesn't have memory of it. So this is like another thing. Yeah. So because she's now 6, so she understands, and she still goes to appointments every year
and getting checked. Yeah.
So I don't have a great answer to this. I'm still like finding that balance of like explaining to her, like, you have something in your head, but I don't want that to become her identity either.
100%. Let's definitely talk about that.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to, because she's at the age where you have to explain why she's going to the doctor.
Yes.
You have to explain, and I don't know if this is her situation, but like maybe why you might be careful on airplanes or whatever.
Yes.
But you don't want her to identify herself as, oh, I'm the kid with the thing in my head, or there's something wrong with me, or
and I mean, she still has like the bigger surgery she had. She still has that stitch there. And it's like no hair will grow around where that is. So literally, like if she puts her hair up, it's there, and kids ask her about it, you know? And so there's like a very visible piece there that we have now had to navigate. Like, how do we explain it? And I don't know if I'm doing it right. So I'm sure like ask me another 5 years, I'll have a different answer. But another thing we've run into is like sports. Like she is really fast. She loves to run. But they had told us like she can't do any high impact, like nothing that's gonna hit her head, you know, like we live in Minnesota, so she has to watch for ice. So we're always like putting a hat on her head to like have anything that would happen if she like falls back on ice or something. And so it's like those things that we're like, but I don't want her to be afraid, but I want her to be aware. So it's like, what's that look like? How do we teach her that? So if anyone's listening and has any suggestions, please let me know.
Has anybody pointed you in the direction of like a child life specialist, like where you live?
No. You mean like a therapist or?
No. So, and I don't even know what that would look like for you, but I do know. So, like with Tyson's previous surgeries, he was still young enough where it didn't really matter. But with his upcoming one, he's fully aware.
Yeah.
Like he
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah.
And we haven't actually told him because it's still too soon. And I do not
Yep.
need him thinking about that for the next
No.
few months. But
No.
we do have meetings with a child life specialist in the time right before that for her.
Yep.
Because I don't know how to talk to him about it.
That's amazing. Oh
So
my gosh.
that child life specialist is going to talk to us together. She's going to coach us on how to talk to him about it. And she's going to talk to him about it. And at his level, like at a 5-year-old's level, like this is how we explain this to a 5-year-old. And she also, what I love about her is that she also integrates the siblings, because especially with Tyson being the youngest and the other kids being older, you know, with my older two, like they're fully aware and get nervous and concerned. So, and you know, it can be hard to say the right thing. Like you just don't, you want to say the right thing, but you don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
So
you know,
I was just,
I'm curious about if it's true in your house, but Eloise has been like the best, almost like she goes, like she'll talk to Esther. Like, I remember when you had surgery, I remember like, Esther, you have something in your, like, she will just tell Esther. And I'm like, well, I guess it's out there, but like, it's their sibling bond. Like, it's like Eloise almost getting it out too, of like sharing, like, hey, you went through this thing, you know, and it was really scary for me. And so that's been an interesting thing. And I haven't stopped it because I'm like, I want her to feel like she can share, but Esther almost has gained more understanding through Eloise than through us at times, listening to Eloise talk about it. So that's been interesting.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna be really raw and like open here. I don't know how Tyson perceives or understands it, because bluntly, I try not to talk to him about it, and I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I don't talk to him about it because I don't want him to identify it. I know that he knows because he says it. Like, he has to take medicine every day. So he knows that he says, I take this for my weak kidney. And yeah.
But that's true. That's the truth.
True. It's cute.
So, yeah.
And his siblings are like really protective over him.
Yeah.
He's 5, but everybody else still calls him the baby and treats him like a baby.
Absolutely.
Which, you know, I don't know. Like, I don't know that anybody, I think it's probably because I don't talk about it. I don't think that they, besides just being protective of him, I don't think that my other kids even talk to him about it, because it must be some unspoken thing because of me that we don't address it. But I feel like that's coming to a head soon. Like,
I am really curious. And to have someone to walk through that, though, what an amazing thing. I don't think I could do that job for a living.
Right?
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful job, though.
Yeah, there's some angels walking on the earth.
Yes, seriously, I truly think that I've never met like a more amazing person than a nurse in a children's NICU or like a children's hospital. Like, they were, I don't even know, they were truly like angels sent from heaven. I felt like they were so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what hope and what kind of encouragement would you tell a parent who's just at the point of diagnosis? What would you tell them?
I would say don't go on Google, but you're going to go on Google. Like, that's just going to happen.
No, but that is so true. Don't go on Google. Don't do it.
I think you even said, I think it was you who said, like, because I remember talking to you about like, you're like, where I got this information that I was telling you. And I was like, I got it on Google. You're like, girl, you don't go on Google. I was like, I know, but I needed someone, like a friend, to tell me that. So it was good. So for me, it was my faith. I needed to be like in deep, deep connection to like a higher power. That was like truly my lifeline. And without it, I would have gone into like a spiral of like complete depression, probably like just like a mess. I was already a mess, but to have like prayer and like worship music happening when I just like had nothing else to like live for, it felt like.
Yeah.
So finding some type of higher power to connect into, I think, is really crucial. I don't know, I guess. I think the other piece of it was just being okay that the best is just not your best. Like that was another piece of like, oh, I need to function at a higher level, but it's just not going to like, I literally can't like today, like, and being okay with that instead of, or just accepting, like, just like, okay, this is just what it is today. So instead of beating yourself up that you can't like work at this level at your job, or like you can't parent at this certain level, or like you are just like not like connecting with your children that you already have because you're so concerned about what's happening, like just know that like, one, your child is going to be okay, two, like you will be okay, and three, like just go like I seriously just day to day. It really is one of those like day to day things.
100%. It's just day to day.
Yeah.
I think that's really solid advice because you know what, even if your story is as beautiful as like Esther's is a miracle and a success story, like let's just even dial it back to like a perfectly healthy child. You don't know what the future holds. You know what I mean? You don't.
Yeah.
So living day to day and in the moment, I can definitely tell you that I became a more conscientious parent and a more in the moment parent afterwards.
So, I think that's true.
Yeah. And actually, like, one thing I wanted to add too about don't Googling is, guys, don't go on Facebook groups. I'm just telling you, like, I swear I was like, oh, I need a support group. Let me go on Facebook groups.
I think we did talk about this. Yeah. We
that
were both
was
like on
bad.
Facebook. Oh, that was so bad.
It was so bad because y'all, Facebook is like, it can be just doomsday, like on a regular day, like on a regular feed, it's doomsday. You go into one of those like kidney disease chat groups and it's just like, you know,
and they're literally there, like you don't go in and just like say, hey, this has been a great
it's been a great day. There's no success stories in there. It's everybody telling you their worst day.
Bad. It's everyone's worst day in one chat. Do not do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. That's the big takeaway from today. Don't Google, don't Facebook group. Not for this kind of stuff. Yeah, take it day to day. Take it day to day. Enjoy the moment. Oh my gosh. Tatiana, thank you so much.
Yes. No, I was gonna say, like, if I was to look back at a critique though, it would be that like I totally babied Esther like way too much. And now I'm having like I'm having to like balance myself now of like she's fine. Like she does not need me to do literally everything for her. Like, nor is that healthy. Even if she couldn't, I would need to like. So yeah, I found that like, thankfully, I realized it because that could have been a real mess. But
God, you know, so it's funny that you mentioned that because that's something that I've been going through this whole past year. Is that obviously, like, I think we need to like, that needs to be another like big topic that we deep dive into, is the fact that it's very natural, I think, to baby your medically complex child. And then we're really not encouraging independence and them. And even though some things are gonna be harder for them, like they need that. They need to be pushed and to learn things on their own and to have their own independence. And I'm 100% guilty of it myself, to the point where it's like, so, you know, Tyson is doing a bonus year of preschool. And that's because like he is so far behind academically that I've had many conversations with his doctors, because, you know, there's always that like, Tyson's been under anesthesia a lot, like not just for his 2 surgeries, but he's had a lot of invasive like testing that required anesthesia. I mean, if I were to tell you, maybe it's 6-7 times. And so when they're under anesthesia like that, it impacts their brain.
It does.
And so like they don't we're having real conversations. Like, is it because he's had so much anesthesia, or is it my fault? Is it because I'm babying him and he's like, he doesn't care if he knows his numbers from his letters or like what a circle is, like
mom will do the counting.
Yeah, mom's going to do this for me. She's going to, color for me and tell me what the shapes are. And I mean, maybe it is my fault. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so, and anyways, he's doing a bonus year. So hopefully we'll just, and thank God that there are programs set up in schools for that, so that when he does have to go to kindergarten next year, we can get somebody in there to like help him. Because that's another thing that a lot of people listening are already like, obviously if their kid has a physical, complication and diagnosis, then a lot of times that, educational piece is behind too, and they need help there as well. So it's so layered. There's so much going on.
There's so many pieces to it. And I just think too, like, I will say, like, God, thankfully, if I was like the overthinking the school thing, I think because there are some areas that I'm like, is this like, because she just like, is this like a brain thing? Like
a brain thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I kind of am just like, well, she'll either will help her catch up. Like she will get through it. Yeah. Also, she has, and I saw this with Tyson too, is like, he will be just fine. Cause like the skills that you sometimes don't, even though it's good to go through school, but there's other skills that will get them further in life past their school years.
Yeah. No,
and they have it.
And that's one of the things that, like, aren't we constantly counseling ourselves too? We're like, okay, so like, yeah, maybe it is a brain thing. Maybe it is he had too much anesthesia. But you know what? We have things in place to help him, and we're going to just navigate what we've got, and we're going to get through it.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. No,
it's been good. Honestly, this has been fun for me because, like, we've talked about stuff that we haven't talked about, and
I agree,
like crazy.
We're always learning something new. I think that there's like so much too that like we've grown as people over the years too, and so it's always fun to come back together and like see that growth in real time play out. So that's always a really cool thing. Yeah. So this was an honor.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, I'm so glad that you guys got a chance to hear from Tatiana and hear her story about her daughter, Esther, because really, her daughter has been a miracle. And I think we need to hear stories of hope. Again, you don't know what the future is going to hold, but I think it's important, to prepare yourself and be resilient and have grit, but also have hope. Even in the face of like certainty, still a little bit of hope goes a long way. So I want you guys to also, I want to encourage you to tune in to Tatiana's podcast as well, Prophetic Justice, twice a month on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And it is really amazing, guys. And come back. We're going to be here again next week. You can check us out on YouTube and Spotify, and I don't know, I got to figure out all the other streaming stuff. I'm still working on that.
You'll get there.
New to it all.
Thank you all for joining us on today's episode of Babywearing and Breastfeeding, Nurturing Miracles. I hope you found our discussion enlightening and that you leave feeling supported and empowered. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Tune in next week for more insights and conversations that connect us all in the shared experience of parenting. Until then, take care and cherish every miracle with your little ones.